We're based here in New York City, and we are a design, development, and production team. We're an outsourced team that works with brands across the country and in the world. So today we are going to talk about how to choose a factory, how to select a factory. Basically, how to select a factory is there's several parts, and what we're going to focus on is 4 steps. So first, your size of your collection. If you have a small collection, a 4 to 7 piece collection, let's say, it's really helpful to try to stay all in one place. Now, that would require that your brand and your collection that season is cohesive and similar pieces. So if you have a swimwear piece and you have a top like this, you're probably not going to be able to make it in the same factory. Some places maybe, but for the most part, if you have a smaller collection, if you're doing a top like this, you might do another top, another women's top. Sorry, there's so much construction, so if you hear noises, sorry. But anyway, so 4 pieces. Let's say you have a dress for women's wear, a top like this, one pair of pants, and a different short sleeve top. That could all be done in the same factory. That's same for men's wear. If you're doing, a short sleeve button up, a t-shirt, like a lightweight spring jacket and a pair of pants, you should be able to do all of that in one factory. For anything where you have like 5 pieces and up, you might have to start diversifying your factories based on a couple things. So mostly how you determine what factory you use is based on the machines that they have. So specialty items like swim or denim and lingerie, they require special machines that not all factories have. So a place that makes this top, again, for sure is not going to make your denim. So it just really depends on what your collection has as an offering to determine where you should go. But anyway, so on Makers Row, you'll find a lot of factories. For anybody who has been in the industry, we have factories that we hundreds of factories. So that's how we determine where to go, is based on the style itself and then also the quantities. So there's different types of factories. There's turnkey or full package factories. They usually have high MOQs, generally 300 units per style per color for adult clothes, and then upwards of 500 to 700 units per style per color for kids. And then when you make baby wear, it's usually with a full package factory, it's usually like 700 to 1,000 pieces. I forgot to mention that if you have any questions along the way, please feel free to ask. I will also stop at the end of each segment to answer questions. Okay, so the other type of factory we have is it's like a full service factory. Sometimes they call them like a boutique factory or like an atelier, a workshop type of factory. And these factories, they're really great for small brands, like the 4 to 6 piece collection. They usually can do a variety of styles, and they can do a lot more service for you without having to do full package. I'll explain what each of these factories are in a minute, so hold tight. The next type of factory is really or the next process, I suppose, is you would be working with outsourced separate vendors, separate contractors, depending on their specialties. All 3 are equally good. There's a variety of reasons for going with either one. For the most part, turnkey or full package factories are really exclusive to people who can make high minimums. So let's start with what a turnkey factory is. They are a factory who supplies everything from fabrics and trims, and they handle all aspects of development and production. In Los Angeles, for example, there's a lot of turnkey knits factories. They keep jersey in stock. They keep sweatshirt fabrics in stock. They keep the ribs in stock. They might even be able to supply you with thermals or PKs or things like that, even like a engineered collar for a polo, for example. So basically you give them your tech pack, your inspiration, maybe even swatches, and they provide the fabrics. Now, some turnkey factories are open to working with third-party fabrics. I prefer to work that way a lot with just certain specialty things. Like if we were to make like this tank top I'm wearing underneath, that factory may be able to do a t-shirt and supply the fabric and the rib for the t-shirt. But when it comes to this tank top, I might want to go to a third-party mill and get like a nice doll jersey and have the factory sew it at the full package turnkey factory. So at those full package factories, they mostly do all of the work under one roof, but they do tend to subcontract, sometimes cutting, sometimes things like specialty, like binding cuttings, especially spaghettis, things like that. And then they usually handle and manage the screen printing, embroidery, or any dyeing, but they don't do those usually in-house. When you go overseas to like Peru, when you're starting to do thousands of units, I've been in factories where it's like a massive city block and it's, 14 stories tall, and they have like the wash house on the first floor. They have the finishing of like for denim, like grinding on the second floor. They have the cutting houses on the third and fourth floor, and then they have all the sewing, all the rest. It's a fully vertical factory, and they will even supply you with the fabrics because in the other building down the street, that's where they're doing the fabrics and dyeing and everything. For the most part, most people that we're working with, that we're talking to through Makers Row, we're focusing on U.S. made and small batch. So turnkey factories are hard to work with because if you do 300 pieces per style, per color, let's say that's even like, even if you had a t-shirt where with the fabric, everything all included was $7, when you multiply that times 300, that's $2,100 just for one t-shirt in one color. So you want to do 5 pieces with them, all, in 3 colors each. So if you do that t-shirt in 3 colors, your production price is $6,300 just for that t-shirt. So that's not always the best route to go for new brands. So the next step or the next type of factories that you can work with are full service factories. They're similar to full package factories, but you supply the fabric and you usually need to handle any of those send outs like screen printing or pleating or anything like that. So from both the full package and is pattern making, sewing, and finishing. Now, some full service factories don't have the marking and grading facility, so you'd still have to find a third party contractor to do your marking and grading, and some also don't have pattern making, but they'll still make your samples. I'm just going to look to see, I see a couple questions here. Is this only for clothing? Yeah, I'm a product developer at Stateless for clothing. I am not really referring to accessories, especially like depending on what type of accessory, they're all very different. For handbags, you may be able to find the same types of factories. Most handbags, they cut and do everything in-house though. So and it's not going to be a 300 piece MOQ, for example. It's going to be, lower MOQs, but they'll be pretty much full package or turnkey. So going back to the full service factories, you find these, there's a lot, like they're like more boutique. They're really good for brands that are small, just starting out, because they don't do everything like a full package factory does, but there's a lot of service that they provide, and it helps because especially if you're coming to this industry with no former previous experience, there's just a lot of things like they'll make some good educated decisions for you, like whether or not that you want it cut on the bias or cut straight grain. They don't need to have everything like kind of handed to them. They'll help you work through it. So that's why we like to, if you have four styles, we like to work with these kind of more full service factories. But with a full service factory, you will have higher price points. You won't have the same MOQs. Some factories in LA, they'll with this full service type of work, they'll do 100 pieces per style per color. They could consider less if you had 3 colors, say, of a style. They might do 50 pieces. So it's still a greater cost savings, and you don't have to buy as many units, especially right now with e-commerce and being the majority of how people do business and not so much with wholesale. If you have wholesale, you have the capacity to hit higher minimums because there's, if you have 14 stores buying that same style, they're buying at least 8 or 9 pieces of that style. You're able to hit higher minimums. But yeah, so There's also in New York, we have a lot of full service factories, and how they work is they don't necessarily count their MOQ by style and color. They'll usually do it by just style. So if I have this blouse and I want it to be done in 3 colorways, but I'm only going to make 100 pieces, they're okay with that. New York is where you'll get the lowest MOQ, but you'll also pay the highest price. In LA, you'd have to clarify. You'd have to say it's 100 pieces total, but across 3 colors, and that would make your price different. Now, if you're working with places in not on the coasts, most of those factories are also these full service types of places, but they're usually set up for volume as well. So it just really depends, and each factory has their own MOQ. I do want to mention before I open up to questions or move on is that the main reason that factories have these minimums, it's not because they want to be exclusive or get you out, right? Factories are set up to varying levels of with assembly lines going. So in those large factories that are full package, they have one person doing an armhole of a t-shirt all day, one operation. That's on an overlock machine, and they're doing that armhole all day. It is every time they take a cut works, like this piece is cut and this collar is cut. Every time they open up a bundle and they have to move it to a different machine, or the operator has to change what they're doing, that is a decrease in efficiency. So when you have a 300 piece MOQ, they can get you a really good price on a t-shirt because they've got one sewer doing the armhole, both, they'll be putting both arms, and they pass that to the next sewer who has the cover stitch machine. They're turning the hems. They're doing the hems of the sleeve and the bottom hem. And then actually the armhole sewer would also be putting together the side seams and here, and maybe even the collar. And then you have somebody else, going and trimming it. So each person is doing one specific operation. In smaller MOQs, most factories, how they're working is that one sewer is doing several operations. The more volume, there might be somebody only doing it all if you're doing 1,000. But in smaller factories, anything that requires a single needle, that sewer is going to switch. They're going to do the welt pocket. Let's see. Okay. Hopefully you can hear me now. Let me know. Okay, sorry. So let's see if there are any other questions here. Makers Row doesn't reply to emails. I think they will. You just have to get the right person. Let's see. Just double checking all the questions. Okay, great. You can see me on the other places. Are there USA manufacturers that produce nylon hosiery for women? Oof. Hosiery is a big one. I've done hosiery a lot in my past. Huge minimums, pretty hard to do. Yes, there are manufacturers. I'm not sure if there are any on Makers Row. I haven't had to look them up because I worked with them in my own network in the past. But the answer is yes. Socks and hosiery have huge minimums, just so you know. But yes, you can do it. Let's see what else. Okay, yes, on Instagram you guys can hear me. Okay, great. So we have our full package who basically literally like you send a PO, you send your tech packs and you send a PO, you approve fabrics and you do everything through the factory. The full service, you have to source your own materials. You have to sometimes use your own pattern maker, but they'll help you with the marking and grading. They'll help you with the the sample making. They'll do your, cut, sew, finishing. Now, the reason I'm calling that a full service factory is because the next type of process that you can use is basically like outsourcing everything. And this is the most common way in my past. When I worked with small brands, because I'm a product developer and production manager, I have the skill set to work with. We have the cutting house do one thing. We have a sewer do the other thing. When there's embroidery, it gets sent out. I manage that, right? And then from there, if it needs to be dyed, if there's any snaps that need to be put on, it needs to go to a different vendor, which is called the finishing house. And the finishing house then trims as well and packs and folds and ships out the garments. So with that in mind, it's a great way to get the best cost. You have a lot more flexibility with your MOQ, but if you don't have experience and you don't have a team like Stateless, you're going to make smaller boutique factories. There's a sewer that we work with in LA who she could do this blouse and swimwear. She could do. I wouldn't give her like leggings or activewear, and I wouldn't give her jeans, but she can do a lot of stuff. So, but she'll cut it for you. She'll help you with your patterns. She'll help you with the marking and grading. She will do all of that for you. So your price is going to be higher. And she usually, because the price, because she's doing so much, she also wants a higher MOQ. Now, nobody really wants to do 25 units, even in New York, like where you can get low MOQs. Nobody really wants to do 25 units per style. Like in the old days, that would be considered a salesman sample set. Like if you had, if you were JCPenney and you had a sales rep in Dallas area, and then you had another one in Florida, and then you had the Northeast, and then you had the Midwest, and you had the Pacific Northwest, the Sun Belt in California, you would have that many units just for your salespeople. So 25 units is really low. But when you work in this way where you're doing kind of everything piecemeal, there's not really an official name for this. I'm calling it like outsourcing or piecemeal. You have the ability to, you have a variety of factories you can work with, so you can have a wide breadth of styles. You can make this piece in one factory. You can make your activewear piece in another factory, and you make your jeans in another factory. But again, you just have to have the know-how, because you're doing everything. You're managing everything. You're sourcing the materials. You're making sure the patterns are correct. You're making sure that the samples are correct. You're then, ordering all of your production materials. You're handling your own marking and grading through a marking and grading service. You're overseeing it getting cut. You're overseeing it getting delivered to the sewing house. You're overseeing it delivered to the dye house, making sure once it gets back from dye, it goes to the printer, and then the printer sends it to the finisher. It's a lot of work. So for the most part, small brands, again, when you're just doing like 4 or 5 pieces in a collection, it's great to use these, what I'm calling like full service kinds of factories who can partner with you a little bit. The bigger you get, like there's still a lot of independent brands that we work with, but they offer like in menswear, it's like, your button ups are going to be made in one place. Your bottoms are going to be made in another place. And again, I want to just call out, that's because the machines are different. Now, some factories, we have one factory we like to work with in New York who can do button-ups and bottoms, because we tend to make them like flat felled seams on your button-up shirts for menswear. And the flat fell seam machine is also used on jeans. So you can share categories in factories, even when you do this kind of piecemeal method. It's just, again, you just have to know what you're doing if you don't want to make mistakes. I'm going to stop and answer a couple questions. I see, for a small collection of swimwear, do you recommend I use a full service factory? I'm on the West Coast, thinking 3 to 5 colors for 1 to 5 styles. So swimwear is interesting. They will be more full service. I do not recommend, if you've never done it yourself, to try to work the last route I'm saying, where you take the thing from the cutter to the sewer. Sometimes you cut on straight grain. Sometimes you cut on cross grain. You have to buy different elastic measurements, getting your spaghetti made. All of these things. Swim is very, very, very complicated. You're going to have to hit a pretty high minimum. There are really good factories that do full service. Maybe not full package. You can supply your own materials. You'll be, they'll make you still buy the elastic, but they'll handle sending out the spaghetti. They'll handle sending all of that stuff out. So that's what I mean. It says paused due to poor connection. I am very sorry, guys. I don't know. We had a storm in New York. I'm just going to wait until Instagram comes back on. Hello? Okay, great. Okay, back. So anyway, I wouldn't recommend trying a full package factory, because you're going to have to hit too many minimums, but you should be able to find, in swim in particular, you should be able to find a pretty full service factory who can help you handle outsourcing, especially the straps and spaghetti and all of that stuff. It's really, really complicated. I'd say like 10 years ago, I did it myself in the piecemeal sort of way. And I had to recut the straps of this bathing suit like 10 times because, and then it didn't say how wide it was. It didn't say whether direction. And I was trying to do it in the factory that I was working with really wasn't a service provider. So they didn't really help me work through it. And we had to like recut the straps. It's only like 3 yards of fabric, but we had to recut the straps. I'm maybe not 10 times, but we had to do it a lot because it was hard. Are there companies that house our inventory and ship out to customers? How expensive are these types of vendors? So I'm not really talking about distribution right now. I'm just talking about making product. That question off YouTube, I think it is. That's a warehouse. That's a distribution center. And yes, there are companies all over the country. Like Rag & Bone they're in New York, but they use a company in Ohio is where I get my stuff shipped from when I order from Rag & Bone. There's DCs or warehouses that help you house your inventory and ship them. Yes. I'm going to see here. So I want to see, there's some more questions. I keep freezing. I'm sorry, guys. Will Stateless work with brands on tech packs? Yes, we make tech packs. Is there a baseline standard amount of units, say for a loungewear line? Yeah, I would say that for the most part, no factory wants to make any less than 50 pieces per style, per color. If you have 4 colorways and the total adds up to 150 units, 300 pieces, the factory will negotiate. Like if one color, you want to make something like a neon yellow, you're probably not going to want to make 50. If you're just starting, maybe you only want to make 25, but the rest of them are a good amount. The factory will work with you for the most part. Let's see. Looking for baby or toddler socks manufactured in US and having a hard time. Socks are hard to get made. There are some sock vendors in the US. A lot of them are in Portugal. I will tell you that much. And they have really high minimums. For a small startup, would you suggest I work with a technical designer to get my pattern tech packs, then take that to a factory, or have a factory do the tech packs too? Ooh, that's a good question. I've talked about this before, so I'm not going to go into too much detail. I do not recommend that we at Stateless do not recommend that you ever work with a factory to make your tech packs. You want to be able to audit, and now this is my personal opinion again, you want to be able to audit and protect your process, and if the factory owns it from start to finish. I worked with a swimwear brand before my time at Stateless, and she had found a small manufacturer who was great. She did full service. She gave her pretty low MOQs. We had to print our fabric ourselves and get it sent to her, but she made the spaghetti. She handled the, guys, it's kicking me off Instagram. I'm so sorry. Let's see. So I've got two things going on. I'm here on this live stream that connects to Facebook and all the others, and then I'm on Instagram as well. And they're both failing me at different times. Okay. Okay, I'm gonna just do that and post. Sorry, guys. I'll try to go live again. Sorry, guys. Let's see if Instagram will take us live. Okay, I'm back. I hope everybody can join me back on hi on Instagram. Sorry about that. Okay, so here we are. What were we talking about? Swimwear in particular and MOQs. So, and tech packs. So this factory, basically we would give her a design, she would make the sample, and in the end, a lot of the decisions were made by the factory instead of the designer. And because the designer was a beginner and didn't know the questions to ask before my time, she got products that she didn't like. Because she had everything with the factory, making her tech packs with the factory, and everything was being made with the factory, there just was not enough control. So how we work at Stateless, and this is how most brands work, we follow best practices from our professional previous experience. So we, like creative director, we sketch. When we have the sketches approved and the fabrics approved, we make BOMs, we make the specs, and we finish out the tech packs with all of the technical call-outs. We pass that to a factory. We review all of the details with the factory. The factory either cuts and sews and makes the pattern, or one of those two things. We might pass it to a pattern maker. It doesn't matter. But we pass it to one of the contractors, and then from there it goes down the line of getting pattern, sample, sewing, back to us, fitting, pattern, sample, sewing, back to us. And then when it comes time to production, we take that pattern, we take it to a marker and grader, we get it graded, and we send it to the factory. The reason that you want that medium between you and the factory is that you can come back and say, our tech pack that we approved has a pocket going this way, not a pocket going this way, pockets going this way. That I would never recommend having a factory do your tech packs, bottom line. Okay, so the next thing I want to talk about is basically, so after we consider the types of factories we can work with, we also have to consider the skill set of every factory. Some factories are really good at swim and activewear, and they might be able to do hoodies and tees, but a hoodie and tees factory doesn't necessarily or usually have the capacity or machines to do swim. So again, like I was saying, the wider variety of styles you offer, the different kinds of fat you use. So with denim or heavy pants, men's shirting, that can all be done in the same factory, but denim on its own is a beast that requires serious know-how. There's shrinkage, there's washing, there's grinding and finishing, there's all kinds of stuff you have to do. So even if your denim is being made in the same place as your button-up shirts, for example, there's a lot of extra steps. So it's really helpful, unless you've done it before on your in a company professionally, it's really helpful to have somebody with the know-how on your side, because unless you're making lots of units, the factory isn't going to help you manage that. They're not going to help you develop especially on jeans, there's like whiskers, there's nicks, there's all kinds, there's sponging. You might not even know the language to ask, and your sewers aren't going to help you with the wash house. The wash house may help you make a decision, but you might, because if you don't have the language and know how to develop a wash on a pair of jeans, you might spend a lot of time and money going back and forth. Also, things like leather, those have to usually be done with a leather manufacturer. And, you know, like a factory that has flat felt seams or machine isn't necessarily going to have like a blind hem for a dress. So these are the kinds of things you want to consider. And sometimes for us, when we have like a brand that's like a 5-piece collection, if they're asking for a zigzag stitch, but nothing else in that in their collection makes sense to send to a different factory, we might say, hey, this factory that we have in mind can do all of your other styles, but they don't have a zigzag stitch machine. Are you okay with cover stitch, for example? So we actually sometimes tweak our designs based on what the factory's machines they have available. So I'm going to go back and look at questions here. I would like to print on colored fabric. Would I typically need to source the fabric from one factory, print it in another factory, and finish it? Okay. So just slight difference in language. You order fabric from a mill, not a factory. You print it with a printer. And in some cases, some fabric mills do offer printing. There are 2 really good ones. It's a business faux pas to share connections. Unless we're engaged in a contract, anybody in this industry will tell you the same. We're pretty tight-lipped, but you can. They're probably on Makers Row. You can find them. Sometimes you want to work with a separate printer. Like if you have like beautiful Italian fabric that you love, and you want to print it, you might want to find a separate printer. It really just depends. So you can either source it from a mill and then send it to a printer, and then you have to send that from the printer. Sometimes you have to get it sent to a wash house, and then they'll wash and fluff it for you, and then you send that to your cutter or your factory. So small little distinction in language. Let's see. But yeah, printing, there's different kinds of printing. There's sublimation printing, there's digital printing, there's wet printing, there's like roll printing, there's all kinds of different printings. They all have different minimums. Digital and sublimation have the lowest minimum, so that's probably what and sublimation can only be nylon, the best, silk as well. You can also silk screen. It's pretty old fashioned. It's hard and expensive. Want that beautiful hand feel. You can do that. And then let's see if there's any other questions here. Do you have expertise with printing designs or weaving them into mesh? Okay, so there's a difference. What you mean is yarn dye versus printing. So mesh, if it's going to be a mesh with Lycra, that's a knit fabric. So you don't weave a print into the knit fabric. You would print it as a surface print. If you were to make plaids for menswear, you have 2 options. You can print the plaid, or most fabrics, you want to just buy them from a mill who has done this already for you. But just so you understand the process, there's these big cones of yarn, and they take those and they put them into dye vats. And the stripes of the plaid that are blue are all on the weaving loom. There's blue threads or yarns going this way. And then the blues that are going this way, they take when they're weaving, the machine is weaving it in and out of these threads, they'll change the thread color to blue when you make those. So that's called the yarn dye process. Stripes are usually yarn dyed, plaids are yarn dyed. Jacquards are yarn dyed. But for the rest of things, especially on knit, something like mesh with spandex, that's a surface print. Very easy to do. Sublimation, usually if it's a poly spandex, you do sublimation. If it's a nylon spandex, you do digital. Would the mills that you know about require large minimums? So with sublimation, you can do as little as 1 roll. But so with printing, we're going off topic, but I'm happy to do that. With printing, you need to provide artwork that's ready and repeatable to scale. So not all fashion designers know how to do that. Some do. But if you hire like a girl from Instagram that you like, who's an illustrator, and she gives you something, the printer is going to have to, we need to put it into a tech pack format that works for surface printing. Sublimation, you can do as little as 1 roll of fabric. And that's because what they do is they print on paper, they take a stock roll of fabric, and they literally, like, the paper slides onto the fabric and it gets pressed through this like machine, and it dyes the surface of the fabric with the ink from the paper. It's kind of like a temporary tattoo or something. It just gets put right on top of the fabric. Digital printing, it's literally like a printer head going across the fabric. So they can usually also do low minimums, but it's pretty expensive for low minimums. So sublimation is your best bet for the lowest minimums, and sublimation can only be done on polyester. Do you have already made apparels manufactured? No, we do not do that. Let me just make sure there's no other questions. I would like to print on colored fabric. I would typically need to source the fabric. Oh, I missed that note. So you cannot print on colored fabric. You have to print on PFP, prepared for print. It has to be white or kind of natural color. You cannot print on colored fabric with sublimation or digital. If you silk screen on colored fabric, or you discharge print using roll printing or wet printing, then you can, but that's huge minimums. Usually roll wet printing is like 1,000-yard minimum. And that's the only time. So discharge print is where you take a silk, it's red, and you want the white, you're making a floral white pattern going across it. It's almost like a screen, but it's on a roll. And that ink literally bleaches out the color from the red silk, and it gets you that color. And it doesn't have a hand feel. It's like you can't feel the print on the surface. If you silk screen, you can also silk screen over a colored fabric. But you cannot. Usually, for the most part, if you have an all-over print, you are printing on prepared for print fabric. Okay, let me see. I think I've answered all the questions. Sorry about my technical difficulties today, guys. So the last thing I really want to mention is that I've said it a million times every time I talk on one of these. Factories require a very clear communication. So it's, again, why I would never recommend a factory doing your tech packs. You want to have the documents that have all the information you want, and you want to give it to the factory. We've talked about it every time. So if you go with full package or turnkey, if you don't have a team like Stateless, if you don't use full package or turnkey, I should say, and you don't have a team like Stateless, it's because they need to know the language. I'm telling you, experience when I was, like a little runner going to factories, and they'd say like, oh, but you have to go get the send out. And you're like, what's the send out? And what they meant was like the binding on the neck. And then it's like, well, I don't know how wide that needs to be. And I don't know what you're talking about. And the pattern doesn't say it. And now, I'm working on a small brand who the owner is kind of just like me, doesn't have a lot of experience. Like, I can't go to them and ask. Who do I find that information from? Sometimes here and there along the way, there's a factory that's nice, and the sewer's like, you got to go get it sent here and call these people, But I keep saying it. I don't know how you guys do it without experience. You're probably going to make a lot of mistakes. But if you do want to do it without experience, just make sure that you use clear communication, and that you try to find a factory that's not full package, but at least a little full service that can help you along the way to help inform you on those, give you those vendors, and give you all the information you need to do it the right way. So let's see. If a factory is doing samples and changes are made, does that tech pack go back to someone else to get revised and then back to the factory? Yes. I'm going to have to get off in 5 minutes, but I will explain this. So the process, I've done a live on this already, so you can go back and look. But the process is, when you're doing development or the sampling phase, you get your tech packs made by you and your company, even if that's a freelance designer or something. If you're not going to work with Stateless, at least hire somebody who knows how to do this thing, right? Then you make all your documents clear as possible. Then you pass that either to a pattern maker, or you pass it to a factory who has a pattern maker. From there, once the patterns are done, if you're working with a pattern maker, you take the fabrics that the samples are going to be made from, and you send it to the cutter. If you're working with a full service factory, you give them the tech pack, they have a pattern maker, they have a cutter, and then they have a sewer. So do you see the difference? If you're doing it little piecemeal, I go to the pattern maker first, then I go to the cutter, then I go to the sewer. We do a fitting, we make the comments on the tech packs, we update the tech packs, the measurements, the bill of materials if necessary, and the sketches. Then we do that process all over again. You usually want to do that at least 3 times to get yourself fit approved. And then from there, you transition to production. I'm actually next week, I'm going to do a conversation about transitioning from development to production. It's like the pre-production phase, really important phase. It's really hard. And I do want to, like, what I'm going to end with here is that in my past, I've worked with a lot of mom and pop kind of brands, and they did it their way. They did it this piecemeal method where they had a pattern maker and they sent it to a cutter and then they sent it to various factories. But because I didn't have professional experience in the past, their process was pretty messy. And when you're messy and loose in development, it always falls out in production, and you have really sloppy production that gets messed up, or it best case scenario, delayed, and you waste a little bit of money. So setting yourself up from the beginning with these processes is really helpful, because then when you have clean, tight development, you have clean production, and they're related to each other. There's no way to avoid it. So making sure that you have the right factory and making sure that you have the right communication tools to communicate with your factory are the way that you will ensure that your samples come out properly and that your development process is clean, so that when it's time to go into production, you don't mess up. I'll give you one little anecdote. Like, the bill of materials of this style didn't have, cord ends written on it. So we didn't order them for production. The cord ends were a 6-week lead time from Japan. And we were already like done with sewing, and we didn't have the cord ends. And the company I worked with, I didn't handle the development at the time. They did. They passed me the stuff and I did production. And the sample that they gave me to reference also didn't have the cord ends because it was an older sample. So I didn't notice that there wasn't a cord end, and it was too late. Like, at the end, we had to wait 6 weeks. No, we were going to now we had to make this style without those cord ends. And it was just always these like little sloppy things like that make it really hard. So that is why I recommend, for most people that we find on Makers Row, I recommend to hire people like us at Stateless, and to also try to work with those kind of full service factories. Again, these are not official titles. This is me making categories. I'm going to see, do you have any advice on how to find plus size fit models? Yes, there are great fit agencies. I love State agencies. So that's really it for technical difficulties, guys. I'm so glad that you enjoy them. I love sharing this information. And I thought that the last week or whenever it was going to be my last, but tune in next week. I'm going to be talking about pre-production and how to transition from sampling to production. Super important. Thanks again. And try to check us out on Makers Row, Stateless. It's makersrow.com/stateless. And then make sure to sign up for Embark Live. Okay. Thanks, you guys. Bye.